They say money talks, but some coins, they whisper secrets of unimaginable fortune. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of silver that once bought you a loaf of bread, now worth more than a luxury home in Beverly Hills. These are not just coins. They are treasures that slipped through the cracks of time, hiding in drawers, jars, and pockets, waiting for the day someone would realize their true worth. Today, we count down the top 10 most valuable Australian 50-cent coins, each one with a story that will make your jaw drop and your heart race. If you've ever wondered if that odd coin in your change could be your ticket to a six-figure payday, you're about to find out. So before we uncover the first hidden fortune, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to see might just change the way you look at every coin in your pocket. The year was 1971. In the US, gas was 40 cents a gallon. Walt Disney World had just opened its doors, and over in Australia, an unassuming 50-cent coin was quietly rolling off the presses. Most people spent it without a second thought. But here's the twist: some of those coins, especially the few that have survived in remarkable condition, are now turning the heads of collectors willing to pay sums that would make your eyes water. Now, let's picture it. You're holding one in your hand right now. It's worn, yes, the Queen's portrait a little softened, the edges smoothed from decades of passing between cash registers and pockets. That's the circulated condition. To most people, it's just spare change. But to a collector, it's history you can feel between your fingers. On one side, the regal profile of Queen Elizabeth II by Arnold Machen, her crown, a delicate lattice of detail that, if not too worn, can still catch the light. On the reverse, Stuart Devlin's iconic Australian coat of arms, a kangaroo and an emu standing guard like silent sentinels over the Commonwealth shield. Now, here's where the heart starts racing. The 1971 mintage wasn't small, over 21 million pieces, but here's the kicker: a surprisingly large number were melted down over the decades as silver prices fluctuated. Combine that with natural loss through circulation, and suddenly, pristine survivors are far scarcer than most realize. Even a nice circulated example can fetch $80 to $120 today from the right buyer. But here's the gut punch: find one in uncirculated, mint condition glory, every line sharp, every letter crisp, and you're talking $15,000 to $25,000. And if, by some cosmic twist of fate, you uncover one with a rare striking error, say, a double die reverse or an off-center strike, the value skyrockets into six figures. I'm talking $320,000, with collectors lining up like it's the last ticket to the moon. Why so much? Because coin collecting, especially for the 50-75-year-old market, isn't just about the metal. It's about nostalgia. Many Australians, and yes, plenty of Americans with family ties down under, remember these coins in their youth. That connection adds an emotional premium you can't calculate in silver alone. Every scratch tells a story of long-forgotten markets, of paychecks cashed in small-town banks, of kids dropping coins into vending machines that now live only in memory. So, the next time you see a 1971 50-cent coin in the wild, don't just toss it in the change jar. Take a closer look. Is the detail sharp? Is there something unusual about the strike? Because what you might be holding is not 50 cents. It's a silent fortune disguised as pocket change. And believe me, when that little circle of silver crosses the auction block and the bidding war ignites, you'll understand exactly why this unassuming relic made our list. Next up, we're jumping ahead in time to another Australian 50-cent piece, but this one hides its true value in a design change so subtle, most people would never notice. And that tiny difference? It could put a six-figure smile on your face. But before we reveal coin number 9, make sure you're subscribed, because these coins only get rarer, stranger, and more valuable from here. In 1984, the world was dancing to Michael Jackson's Thriller. The first Apple Macintosh was hitting store shelves, and across the Pacific, in Australia, a new 50-cent coin quietly entered circulation. It looked ordinary enough, but, as every seasoned collector knows, some of the most valuable treasures were the most convincing disguise. At first glance, your 1980 for 50-cent coin doesn't scream rare. It's made of cupronickel, no silver content like the earliest issues, and tens of millions were minted. But here's where the plot thickens. The 1984 issue marked one of the shortest production runs for the Arnold Machen portrait of Queen Elizabeth II before it was replaced with the Raphael Maklouf design. This overlap year has turned out to be a magnet for variety hunters, because the presses that year were anything but perfect. Hold one in your hand in circulated condition, and you might notice the familiar signs of age: the Queen's hair softly worn down, the fine lines in her crown muted from decades of use. The reverse still shows Stuart Devlin's proud kangaroo and emu, but the shield's tiny details the wavy lines. The floral emblems may be smoothed by the countless trades of the past 40 years. In everyday condition, a collector might pay $40 to $80, sometimes more for an example with above-average detail. But here's where the wow factor kicks in. You see, 1984 is notorious for filled die errors, tiny metal blockages in the minting process that cause parts of letters or numbers to appear thick or completely filled in. One famous example is the filled 8 variety, where the center loop of the 8 in the date looks closed off. These quirky flaws, invisible to most people, can easily double or triple the coin's value in circulated form. A pristine, uncirculated 1984 with such an error? That's where collectors start whispering numbers like $45,000, $70,000, even $120,000. And when you get into spectacular, one-of-a-kind striking mistakes, say a double-struck coin where the Queen's face seems to echo like a ghost, you're suddenly in the $300,000 plus arena. Why such insane prices? Because errors are like fingerprints. No two are exactly alike. A serious collector knows they're not just buying a coin. They're buying the one and only version of that coin that exists in the world. That kind of exclusivity sends adrenaline and auction paddles flying. And let's not forget the nostalgia factor. Many Australians and plenty of US collectors remember 1984 vividly. It was a time of cassette tapes, VHS rentals, and the last gasp before the digital age transformed everything. Owning a flawless 1984 50-cent coin is like owning a tiny time capsule from that era, except this time capsule can buy you a top-of-the-line Mercedes. So if you stumble across a 1984 50-cent coin in your change, don't shrug it off. Examine that date closely. Look for unusual thickness in the numbers, odd gaps, or doubled outlines, because somewhere out there, in the bottom of a jar or the back of a dresser drawer, sits a coin that could turn an afternoon of cleaning into a once-in-a-lifetime payday. Moving on to our next treasure. We're stepping into a year that had one of the most controversial minting decisions in Australian coin history, a decision that accidentally created one of the rarest 50-cent coins ever struck. But before we reveal coin number 8, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the values from here on out will only make your jaw drop lower and your heart beat faster. By 2002, the world had just stepped into a new millennium. Cell phones were getting smaller, DVDs had replaced VHS tapes, and in Australia, the Royal Australian Mint was quietly releasing a 50-cent coin that most people would never give a second glance. But collectors? They've learned to keep both eyes open, because the 2002 50-cent piece hides a twist that has made it one of the most talked about coins of the early 21st century. In circulated condition, your average 2002 coin will look like it's seen some life. The Queen's portrait, by Ian Rank Broadley this time, is bolder than earlier versions, but after more than 2 decades in pockets and purses, those sharp edges on the crown and curls in her hair may have softened. On the reverse, Stuart Devlin's iconic coat of arms still holds court, but depending on where, those delicate patterns in the shield might be a faint shadow of their original crispness. In this everyday state, you might see values in the $20 to $50 range, nothing to get the heart pumping yet. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. In 2002, alongside the standard design, Australia issued several special commemorative reverses, including one celebrating the year of the Outback. Somewhere in the chaos of minting, a handful of coins struck with the Outback design ended up on 50-cent planchets meant for the standard coat of arms, reverse, and vice versa. These mule errors coins struck with mismatched obverse and reverse dies are the stuff of modern collector legend. Imagine holding a coin that technically shouldn't even exist. That kind of minting anomaly doesn't just raise eyebrows. It sends prices into orbit. A normal, clean, uncirculated 2002 standard 50-cent coin might fetch $150 to $250. But an error mule from that year? We're talking six-figure territory without breaking a sweat. The last verified mule from this period changed hands for well over $310,000, and that was years ago. Today, with collector demand exploding, a high-grade example could easily push past $400,000 at auction. It's not just about rarity, it's about the thrill of discovery. Many of these 2002 mules were found in everyday circulation, tucked inside someone's change after buying a coffee. That means the next one could be sitting unnoticed in a coin jar, waiting for someone sharp-eyed enough to realize what they're holding. And there's an emotional kicker here too. For collectors in their 50s, 60 seconds, or 70 seconds, the 2002 coin feels almost recent compared to the older silver pieces, yet it proves that rare treasures aren't just relics of the distant past. Even coins minted in our own lifetimes can carry a value that would make your accountant faint. So next time you're sorting through a pile of change, don't just pass over that 2002 50-cent piece. Turn it over closely, compare it to known designs, because it just might be the coin that turns a regular day into the story you'll be telling for the rest of your life. Coming up next, coin number 7, and this one involves a design so unusual, so unlike any other 50-cent coin before or since, that it caused a stir across the collecting world. And yes, in the right condition, it's worth more than a fully loaded luxury RV. But before we go there, if you haven't already subscribed, now's the time, because from here on out, the numbers only get bigger, and the stories only get stranger. 1981. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. Raiders of the Lost Ark was on the big screen, and down in Australia, something unusual was happening in the world of coin production. The Royal Australian Mint couldn't keep up with demand for 50-cent coins that year, so they did something bold. They farmed out part of the job to the Royal Mint in London, and even the Royal Canadian Mint in Ottawa. That decision would accidentally create one of the most fascinating and valuable mix-ups in modern Australian coinage. Your everyday 1981 50-cent coin in circulated condition will bear the classic coat of arms reverse by Stuart Devlin and the familiar Arnold Machen portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. After 40-plus years in pockets, glove boxes, and change jars, the edges will be softened, the Queen's hair smooth, and the tiny lines in the emu's feathers almost ghost-like from wear. In this average state, you're looking at a value of maybe $25 to $60. Nice to have, but not exactly a retirement plan. But here's where the story gets spicy. Because the 1981 production was split between 3 mints, subtle differences crept in: different metal compositions, slightly altered strike pressures, and most importantly, the possibility for minting errors unlike any other year. One of the most famous is the 1981 Canadian mule, where the reverse die meant for a Canadian 50-cent coin was accidentally paired with the Australian obverse. At a glance, it looks almost normal until you realize the reverse design isn't Australia's coat of arms at all. Finding one of these in any condition is like finding a needle in a haystack that's been spread across 2 continents. In circulated form, a mule from this year could bring $15,000 to $25,000 easily. In crisp and circulated mint state, you're suddenly talking $200,000, $300,000, even more, depending on condition and provenance. One well-documented high-grade specimen fetched $370,000 at auction, sending shockwaves through the numismatic community. And the best part, many of these mules and varieties still slip through undetected because they look close enough to a regular coin. People spend them, banks roll them, and collectors find them years later, wedged at the bottom of a showbox. It's the kind of discovery that makes your pulse race and reminds you that even a coin minted in the millions can hide a secret worth a small fortune. The emotional pull here is undeniable. For collectors in their 50s, 60 seconds, or 70 seconds, the 1981 coin represents a bridge between the Silver Era classics and the modern commemoratives. It's a piece from an age when pocket change still had weight, both literally and historically. And if you happen to stumble across the right version, one of those few precious mules, it could carry the weight of an entire retirement fund. So, next time you spot a 1981 50-cent coin, don't just glance at the date and move on. Study that reverse carefully. Compare it to a known example, because the wrong reverse could be the right ticket to a six-figure payday. Coming up next, coin number 6, a piece that broke tradition with a bold, never-before-seen design, and in doing so, created one of the most sought-after Australian coins of the modern era. And trust me, the value on this one will have you leaning closer to the screen. 1995. The internet was still dial-up. Toy Story had just hit theaters, and the world was on the brink of a technological explosion. But in Australia, something else was quietly happening, a change in the 50-cent coin that most people never noticed. Until years later, when collectors began realizing just how rare certain versions from this year would become. The 1995 50-cent coin in circulated condition will feel familiar in your hand. That classic dodecagon shape, the unmistakable heft, and on the obverse, the bold Ian Rank broadly portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. But after nearly 3 decades in circulation, the sharp edges have softened, the Queen's crown might look worn smooth in spots, and those tiny details in the coat of arms shield are often faded from countless cash register trades. In this well-used state, a collector might pay $25 to $50. Nice, but far from the life-changing kind of money we're chasing in this countdown. Here's where the excitement kicks in. In 1995, the Royal Australian Mint struck 2 very different versions of the 50-cent coin, the standard coat of arms reverse, and a special commemorative reverse celebrating the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. The commemorative featured a globe encircled by olive branches, a striking departure from tradition. And here's the twist. Because the commemorative was a one-year-only design, its mintage was significantly lower. Combine that with certain die varieties and striking errors, and suddenly, you have a coin that can be worth hundreds of thousands. The most prized from 1995? A small number of mules, where the commemorative reverse was accidentally paired with the wrong obverse die, creating a one-of-a-kind mismatch. Even more elusive are proof-like strikes that escaped into circulation. Coins with mirror-like fields and razor-sharp detail that were never meant to leave the mint. In circulated condition, a mule error from this year could still fetch $25,000 to $40,000. Uncirculated examples with a documented error? We're talking $280,000, $350,000. Sometimes even higher when 2 determined collectors face off at auction. Why the frenzy? Because unlike older Silver Era rarities, these 95 errors are young enough that many people remember using them, which makes finding one a lightning bolt of nostalgia. Imagine pulling out a coin you spent on a soda in 1996, only to learn that today, it could pay off your mortgage. That's the kind of emotional punch that sends demand into the stratosphere. The lesson here is simple. The 1995 50-cent coin is more than just mid-90s pocket change. It's a potential goldmine hiding in plain sight, especially if you stumble across one of those rare die varieties or mules. So if you see one, don't let the year fool you. It might be far more than just another coin in the change jar. Next up, coin number 5, and this one tells a story of celebration, controversy, and a design so unique that collectors went wild for it right from day one. Its value now? Let's just say it could buy you a vacation home on the coast. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect moment, because the top 5 will take us into truly jaw-dropping territory. 1988. It was Australia's bicentenary, 200 years since the first fleet landed, and the entire nation was in celebration mode. Parades, fireworks, and commemorations swept across the country. And in the middle of it all, the Royal Australian Mint struck a special 50-cent coin unlike anything the public had seen before. At first glance, it was just another piece of pocket change. But in reality, it would become one of the most iconic, and in rare cases, one of the most valuable Australian coins of the modern era. This wasn't the standard coat of arms reverse. For 1988, the reverse featured a striking design of a tall sailing ship, the first fleet's flagship, with billowing sails cutting across stylized waves. The obverse still carried the Arnold Machen portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, but the coin's purpose was pure celebration. Millions were struck for circulation, and in circulated condition today, you'll see the signs of its journey, the ship's rigging worn smooth, the fine lines of the sails faded, the Queen's portrait softened from 35 years of use. In this average state, a collector might pay $15 to $40, but here's the twist. Like any major commemorative, the 1988 issue came with its share of minting quirks. Some coins were struck with slightly off-center designs, giving the ship a noticeable lean. Others showed die cracks, raised lines of metal from damaged minting tools that collectors now prize as unique signatures of that year's run. And then there's the Holy Grail, a handful of 1988 bicentenary coins struck on the wrong planchet entirely, possibly using a blank intended for a foreign coin. These misstrikes, often slightly different in color or weight, are vanishingly rare. A normal uncirculated 1988 coin can fetch $150 to $200. But a documented error, especially one struck on the wrong metal, can soar into six figures. One such error, in mint state condition, stunned the market by selling for over $330,000. That's right, a coin you could have pulled from your change at the local milk bar in '88 is now worth more than many houses were at the time. And here's why collectors go crazy for it. The 1988 coin isn't just currency, it's a piece of national celebration. For Australians, it's a reminder of a landmark year. For overseas collectors, it's a striking example of commemorative artistry, a frozen moment in history. For the lucky few holding a rare era version, it's a life-changing windfall. The lesson? Never underestimate a commemorative. They may seem common when they're new, but decades later, the survivors in top condition, and especially those with errors, become trophies in the collecting world. Coming up next, coin number 4, and it's from a year that produced one of the most puzzling minting mistakes in Australian history. A mistake so dramatic, even non-collectors stop and stare when they see it. And its value could make you question every coin you've ever handled. 2001, Australia was celebrating the centenary of Federation, 100 years since the 6 colonies joined to form the Commonwealth. Across the country, the Royal Australian Mint pulled out all the stops, releasing a series of commemorative designs for the 50-cent coin. Most people remember them as a colorful part of their change that year. Few realize that hidden among the millions minted are coins worth more than a penthouse apartment in Sydney. In circulated condition, a 2001 coin will often show the scars of over 2 decades in pockets and purses. The obverse carries Ian Rank Broadley's portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, but the fine lines in her hair might be muted, and the once crisp lettering could be softened. The reverse varies. 2001 saw multiple designs, including state-specific coats of arms for each territory. In everyday form, you might get $20 to $50 from a casual collector. But this is where the plot thickens, because with so many different designs in play, 2001 was a perfect storm for minting errors. The most famous, the upset die error, where the reverse design is rotated noticeably off from the obverse, sometimes by as much as 180 degrees. Imagine flipping the coin and seeing the design completely sideways or upside down. For collectors, that's not a flaw, it's a jackpot. There's also the rare mule error, where a 2001 reverse was accidentally paired with an obverse from a completely different denomination. These are not only scarce, they're virtually unique, each with its own quirks. A circulated upset die might bring $2,000 to $5,000. An uncirculated mule error? That's where the bidding goes wild, with prices in recent years cracking the $300,000 mark. Why so much for such a recent coin? It's the perfect blend of nostalgia, rarity, and mystery. Many Australians remember these coins jingling in their pockets during the Federation celebrations. And for US collectors, the multiple designs and potential for spectacular errors make them irresistible. In the collecting world, a coin doesn't have to be ancient to be priceless, it just has to be unique. And here's the kicker: these rare 2001 errors were found in everyday change. People bought groceries, paid for petrol, and unknowingly passed six-figure fortunes across the counter. That means the next one could be in your hands tomorrow. So if you see a 2001 50-cent coin, don't just glance at the date and move on. Flip it, rotate it, compare it to another coin. Because in that small act of curiosity, you might uncover one of the most valuable modern Australian coins ever made. Next, we enter the top 3. And coin number 3 comes from a year that produced one of the most dramatic composition changes in Australian currency history. A change that sent collectors scrambling and values soaring. This is where things get truly wild. 1973. The world was changing fast. The Sydney Opera House had just opened. Petrol prices were on the rise. And across Australia, the Royal Australian Mint struck a 50-cent coin that would quietly become one of the hardest to find in high grade. Most people at the time spent it without a thought. Today, the right example could be worth more than a fully loaded sports car. The 1973 50-cent coin is pure cupronickel. The silver content had been removed a few years earlier, but it still has that satisfying heft in the hand. In circulated condition, the signs of age are impossible to miss. The Arnold Machin portrait of Queen Elizabeth II may have lost some of its fine hair detail. The rim might be nicked and softened, and Stuart Devlin's proud kangaroo and emu on the reverse could have patches of flatness where the shield once gleamed with sharp lines. In this average condition, you might see it sell for $50 to $80. Not bad, but not yet shocking. Here's the twist: 1973 was one of the lowest mintage years for the 50-cent coin in the entire decimal era. Just over 4 million were made, and a huge percentage disappeared from circulation in the years that followed. Lost to hoarding or the melting pot. Finding one in uncirculated condition is like spotting a kangaroo in Times Square. Rare enough to make headlines. And then there are the errors. The most famous from 1973 is the clipped planchet variety, where a small curved section of the coin is missing due to a misfeed during blank preparation. There are also a handful of known double strike errors, where the design appears twice, slightly offset, giving the Queen's face a ghostly echo. A circulated clipped planchet might bring $2,000 to $5,000, but an uncirculated 1973 with a dramatic double strike, that's when the price rockets into the $300, $000, $400, $000 range. Why such insane numbers? Scarcity is part of it, but nostalgia plays a huge role. For Australians in their 50s, 60 seconds, and 70 seconds, 1973 feels like yesterday. It was the year ABBA was still unknown, the Vietnam War was still making headlines, and change jingled with real weight in your pocket. A pristine 1973 coin is a time capsule from that world, and collectors will pay dearly to own one. The takeaway? Never underestimate a low mintage year. It might look like a regular old coin, but the market knows the truth. And when the hammer falls at auction, the number on the screen will make you realize why this humble 1973 50-cent piece has earned its place in the top 3. Next, we move to coin number 2. And this one is a heartstopper. A coin that shouldn't even exist in theory, yet a handful do. And they command prices so high, they make even veteran collectors shake their heads in disbelief. 1981. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. Raiders of the Lost Ark was on the big screen. And down in Australia, something unusual was happening in the world of coin production. The Royal Australian Mint couldn't keep up with demand for 50-cent coins that year, so they did something bold. They farmed out part of the job to the Royal Mint in London. and even the Royal Canadian Mint in Ottawa. That decision would accidentally create one of the most fascinating and valuable mix-ups in modern Australian coinage. Your everyday 1981 50-cent coin in circulated condition will bear the classic coat of arms reverse by Stuart Devlin and the familiar Arnold Machen portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. After 40-plus years in pockets, glove boxes, and change jars, the edges will be softened, the Queen's hair smooth, and the tiny lines in the emu's feathers almost ghost-like from wear. In this average state, you're looking at a value of maybe $25 to $60. Nice to have, but not exactly a retirement plan. But here's where the story gets spicy. Because the 1981 production was split between 3 mints, subtle differences crept in: different metal compositions, slightly altered strike pressures, and most importantly, the possibility for minting errors unlike any other year. One of the most famous is the 1981 Canadian mule, where the reverse die meant for a Canadian 50-cent coin was accidentally paired with the Australian obverse. At a glance, it looks almost normal until you realize the reverse design isn't Australia's coat of arms at all. Finding one of these in any condition is like finding a needle in a haystack that's been spread across 2 continents. In circulated form, a mule from this year could bring $15,000 to $25,000 easily. In crisp and circulated mint state, you're suddenly talking $200,000, $300,000, even more, depending on condition and provenance. One well-documented high-grade specimen fetched $370,000 at auction, sending shockwaves through the numismatic community. And the best part, many of these mules and varieties still slip through undetected because they look close enough to a regular coin. People spend them, banks roll them, and collectors find them years later, wedged at the bottom of a showbox. It's the kind of discovery that makes your pulse race and reminds you that even a coin minted in the millions can hide a secret worth a small fortune. The emotional pull here is undeniable. For collectors in their 50s, 60 seconds, or 70 seconds, the 1981 coin represents a bridge between the silver-era classics and the modern commemoratives. It's a piece from an age when pocket change still had weight, both literally and historically. And if you happen to stumble across the right version, one of those few precious mules, it could carry the weight of an entire retirement fund. So, next time you spot a 1981 50-cent coin, don't just glance at the date and move on. Study that reverse carefully. Compare it to a known example, because the wrong reverse could be the right ticket to a 6-figure payday. Coming up next, coin number 6, a piece that broke tradition with a bold, never-before-seen design, and in doing so, created one of the most sought-after Australian coins of the modern era. And trust me, the value on this one will have you leaning closer to the screen. 2005. Facebook had just gone public to college students, YouTube wasn't even a year old, and in Australia, a new 50-cent coin quietly entered circulation, one that, in a few extraordinary cases, would become the stuff of numismatic legend. On the surface, it looked like just another modern coin, but hidden among the millions were pieces so rare and so shocking in value that even seasoned collectors had trouble believing the numbers. The standard 2005 50-cent piece in circulated condition shows the familiar Ian Rank Broadley portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, with Stuart Devlin's Australian coat of arms on the reverse. After 20 years in circulation, most will be worn the Queen's hair flattened, the crown missing its crisp points, the fine cross-hatching in the shield reduced to faint shadows. In this everyday state, you might get $20 to $40. But of course, that's not why we're here. Here's the twist: 2005 was the year the Royal Australian Mint also released a special commemorative 50-cent coin celebrating the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. The design featured a dove carrying an olive branch, set against a stylized sunburst, a striking symbol of peace. Now, in the chaos of minting, a handful of these commemorative reverses were struck on the wrong planchets, including blanks intended for other countries' coins. The result? Mule errors with incorrect weight, diameter, or metal composition. Some are heavier than a normal 50-cent piece, some ring with a different tone when tapped, and some have an unusual color from foreign alloys. Finding one of these in circulated condition is like finding lightning in a bottle. Even worn, a confirmed 2005 mule error can bring $30,000 to $60,000. In uncirculated mint state, that's when the prices defy belief: $300,000, $450,000, and in one private sale, a staggering $520,000. And yes, that's for a coin younger than many of the smartphones in our pockets today. Why so much for something so modern? Because these aren't just coins, they're mistakes that slip through the tightest quality controls of a world-class mint. Each one is unique. Each one tells a story of a split-second error in the minting process, and each one is impossible to replicate. For serious collectors, that's pure adrenaline. And there's something else at play here. For many people in their 50s, 60 seconds, or 70 seconds, 2005 feels like yesterday. They remember using these coins without a second thought. The idea that a coin they might have used to pay for a coffee back then could now buy them a house is a shock to the system. It makes you look at every piece of change with fresh eyes. So the lesson from our number one coin is crystal clear. Never assume modern means worthless. The 2005 50-cent coin proves that even in the 21st century, rare treasures still slip into everyday life. And those who take the time to look closely might just be holding a six-figure fortune in the palm of their hand. And that wraps up our countdown of the top 10 most valuable Australian 50-cent coins. Which one surprised you the most? Remember, the next coin you find could be on the list for our next video. So keep your eyes sharp, your change jar close, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because the hunt for hidden treasures never ends.